Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're looking at a massive, completely unexpected cultural shift unfolding right now in 2026. For years, we just assumed that the younger you were, the more permanently glued to your digital identity you had to be, right? But the very generation that literally grew up posting, liking, and going viral, the ultimate digital natives, are actively doing the unthinkable. They're choosing to log off. Okay, let's dive into this. The big question bouncing around marketing departments, tech companies, and honestly, probably your own dinner table is exactly this. Are digital natives actually abandoning the web altogether? Like, are we looking at a complete rejection of the digital world? Well, the short answer is no, but what they're actually doing is far more fascinating and way more disruptive to the major tech giants. Just consider this number for a second. According to a recent Pew Research study, an astounding 45% of teens openly admit they spend way too much time on social media. But here's the kicker. 44% of them are now intentionally reducing their use. They aren't just passively aware of their screen time anymore. They are taking deliberate, aggressive action to reclaim it. Section 1. The quiet logout. You see, this isn't just some fringe wellness trend pushed by a handful of influencers. No, it's a quiet, deliberate, and widespread mass movement happening in university dorms, bedrooms, and shared apartments globally. Young people are simply closing apps, deactivating accounts, and choosing not to log back in. Actually, according to data from GWI, Gen Z is the only generation whose time on social media has fallen since 2021. While millennials and older generations love to, talk about taking a digital detox or going off the grid for a weekend, Gen Z is actually doing it. They're fundamentally restructuring their daily habits. Section 2. The mental health toll. So why is this happening? Well, unlike older users who adopted these platforms as adults, Gen Z grew up inside them. That means the psychological toll is deeply embedded in their formative years, and the impacts are absolutely stark. The American Psychological Association found that 58% of Gen Z identify social media as a significant source of stress. We're talking about chronic fear of missing out, or FOMO. We're talking about the cognitive fog and shortened attention spans increasingly dubbed TikTok brain. And of course, severe digital dysmorphia caused by constantly comparing real life to digitally altered, hyper-curated images. Their exit isn't a weakness, guys. It's a highly intelligent, rational response to a fundamentally flawed ecosystem. There's one sentiment shared over and over again by Gen Z users that perfectly captures this, and it's this. It stopped feeling like mine. Just think about that. Authenticity was slowly transformed into an exhausting performance. Being online used to be fun, but now it requires constant self-monitoring, managing multiple online personas, and dealing with the low-grade anxiety of being permanently visible and judged. Section 3. Distrust and the algorithm. But, it's not just personal burnout at play here. Structural and systemic failures are actively driving them away. Over the last few years, the very architecture of social media has changed, and users have absolutely noticed. They began to see these platforms not as digital town squares for human connection, but basically as attention-harvesting surveillance tools. Sure, Gen Z willingly gave up data initially for the convenience of relevant content, but today, their feeds are dominated by brands, influencers, and relentless advertisements. There's a deep, deep distrust of how algorithms manipulate their attention and push misinformation. They realize these platforms are engineered to maximize engagement and profit, entirely at the expense of user well-being. And this brilliantly illustrates the breaking point. A recent Frontier study mapping screen time against digital minimalism proves that the crushing pressure of high screen time, especially for students navigating hybrid learning and academic demands, is actively triggering minimalist coping behaviors. Nearly 60% of students have adopted practices like app pruning, notification silencing, and scheduled device-free windows just to reclaim their focus. Section 4. The rise of dumbphones. So you're probably wondering, how exactly are they managing to disconnect when the modern world practically requires a smartphone for everything from banking to booking a train? Well, let's contrast the two devices. On one side, you have the modern smartphone, a chaotic, pocket-sized slot machine offering endless apps, algorithmic feeds, and relentless performance pressure. On the other side, the boring phone. It makes calls, sends texts, maybe has a basic map, but has zero social apps. It is an absolute masterclass in intentional limitation. By stripping away the noise, users report a massive return of mental clarity. Literally, they wake up and read a book instead of doom scrolling. And you really have to appreciate the incredible irony here. This massive offline movement to ditch smartphones was actually fueled by a viral hashtag, wait for it, on TikTok. Yeah, The bring back flip phones trend exploded online, and as a direct result, manufacturers like HMD saw their flip phone sales literally double in a single year. You can't make this stuff up. Section 5. What Gen Z does instead. That leads us to the obvious question. If they aren't passively scrolling on Instagram or swiping endlessly on TikTok, what are they actually doing with their time? Well, they're building a completely new digital landscape. The old way was all about public broadcasting, passive scrolling, and identity-driven performance. But the new way is intimate and intentional. Gen Z is flocking to niche Discord servers, text-based apps like No Place, and online gaming where they can just chat with real friends. Even more fascinating is the return to analog hobbies: baking, journaling, film photography, things that produce outcomes entirely outside the attention economy. After all, a loaf of bread doesn't need a like count to be meaningful, right? Now, what's really interesting here is how this exit from social platforms is pushing Gen Z toward new tech. As they abandon algorithmic feeds filled with misinformation and ads, that same frontier study shows they are increasingly relying on artificial intelligence. They're using AI not for social connection, but as a pragmatic, unbiased tool to retrieve information, help with budgeting, and streamline decisions, all without the cognitive overload of traditional social media. Section 6. The intentional digital future. So what does this whole paradigm shift mean for the future of the internet? We're entering an era where the rules are being completely rewritten by the users themselves. It's all about JOMO, the joy of missing out. This is a massive cultural shift, prioritizing personal well-being and meaningful, intentional engagements over the pressure to be constantly connected. The platforms that are going to survive this correction are the ones that prioritize privacy, relevance, and authentic community over mass-scale attention extraction. Gen Z isn't destroying the internet. They are simply forcing it to rebuild around healthier, more human principles. So the crucial point is this. I want you to look at your own smartphone habits right now. Think about the last hour you spent online. Are you scrolling to genuinely connect with people and ideas you care about? Or are you just scrolling out of habit? Because honestly, it might be time to take a page out of Gen Z's book, embrace a little digital minimalism, and intentionally reclaim your digital life.